all the earlier videos that I've done on that channel, my glasses are all foggy because it's like super moist and like sweaty down here. And I'll be trying to draw and the paper will be kind of curling up and everything. But you don't have that problem. You're up north.
Yes, I'm up in the north. It's snowy outside right now.
Yeah. Did you ever go back? Since last time I saw you was in Montreal. Have you ever gone back to?
Now, I think that when you saw me was maybe the very first summer that I was here. So I went after, because when I came here for like 3 months to just kind of test the waters and see how I liked it. And then I went back to Portland for just a couple months and then I came back. So I've been here for like 5-6 years now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Were you still doing line work?
The last year, yeah. The last year we did line work was like the first year that I was living here. So I was doing it at a distance, and then we wrapped it up because even though there was like a whole team of people doing it, I did a lot for it, and it was a little hard to do it at a distance.
Yeah.
But it was good. We had like 3 years, and it was like a trilogy, you know, like we had a narrative arc for our comic book festival.
Yeah, that's right. But I think the very first time I ever met you was in San Francisco, I think, because I did SF Zine Fest. And I think you were a part of that, weren't you?
Yep. And that sounds about right. I remember, and it's funny, I was just looking, I was looking at like your Fantagraphics page or something, and I saw that you were born in 1984, and I was like, oh, that's like super funny. Like Noah's not even that much younger than me, but I remember like, I think it's like back in the day, like when you're younger, all age seems older. So I remember I was like, I don't even know how old I was, but I remember I was like, oh, Noah, he's this real young guy. He's this new kid, you know? And now I'm like, oh, he's like the same age as I am, basically. Yeah. You know, he's just a couple of years different from me. So it's kind of funny.
Yeah, I was telling my wife the other day that like how like years don't even mean anything to me anymore. Like, I was like kind of fretting because I feel like I'm not even living my life anymore. I've just been drawing so much.
But I mean, yeah, that might be true. But then at the same time, you give me the impression of like someone who worked on their books. Like you did you kind of like did the right thing, which I think is like you just worked, you know, you just like got stuff out, you got issues of your comic out, you got books out, and like now it's like, you know, you're like a certain amount of time into your career, but you have like a bunch of stuff, and then you've kind of honed what you want to do, or at least it seems to me that you've got a handle on your like narrative voice and everything, and I think that's like that practice makes perfect kind of thing. So in that way, it's good.
How does it compare to you? How do you see your own career in comics going?
Well, I mean, I think for me, I was really slowed down like in my 20s and 30s. I was just real slow. Like I was kind of it's funny because it's like my work is so unperfect, but I was kind of a perfectionist in some ways. Like I would sit on an idea forever and I think, oh, that's a cool idea, but can I work on it? Like how can I make it better and things like that. And then now I've really tried to embrace more the idea of just getting stuff done, like just working, moving forward, seeing where you end up. And you know, like if your book's not perfect, the next book's going to be that much better, or what have you. And I think that's allowed me to like at least break out, because for me it's like I'm at the beginning in many ways of like my comics career. You know, like I'm starting to have books come out, which is it feels like I was doing comics and zines and organizing things for forever, but then all of a sudden now I'm like, oh, the books are coming out now. It's actually kind of starting to roll, and I wish I had gotten started on it earlier. I think that coming here to Montreal actually like helped me, I don't know, internalize that idea, right, of you know, like that finished is better than perfect, you know, like it's just better to keep on rolling, because so many people here, they're, you know, like they just have a bunch of books done, you know, like they're 10 years younger than me, and they have like 6 books finished, and they're still working on things and stuff like that. So I like that model.
What cartoonists do you see in Montreal?
Well, one thing that happened to me that was good is when I first got here, I got an offer from a guy named who's a cartoonist and a publisher. His name's Luc Bosset, and he publishes Pow Pow.
Pow Pow, yeah. Cool.
And so that was really really cool because that like he publishes a bunch of different creators, and so it's like I kind of like fell in, like I had like a ready-made gang of people to like talk with and hang out with and stuff. I of course it's like, you know, this last year I haven't seen anybody for a year now, but you know, I always like to hang out with all those Pow Pow kids, you know. So there's like Alexandre Fontaine Rousseau, who did the translation of my book into French, and he's a writer himself. I hang out with him a lot, with Luc a lot, Cathon, sometimes not as much as I'd like, but like Julie Delport, and just lots of different like lots of different people, you know, who are doing their own thing. And I, you know, I'm not like in my 20s or 30s anymore. I like don't like go out every week or even before the pandemic. But you know, it's like I see everybody at the little comic festival, or like I try and go to the openings and stuff like that.
Yeah. A lot of events at the library, Drawn Quarterly.
Yeah, I used to go to those more when I was closer, and I moved a little bit further away, so now it's like I got a haul butt to get across town to get to it. So I need to go to those a lot more because they have so many great events and things like that there.
Do you don't speak French, do you?
I do.
Are you half American, half like French Canadian or something?
Yeah, pretty much. I was born in the United States, but my mother's from Quebec and my father's from Haiti. So I have like a French background, although I won't give all the details, but I basically lost all my French when I was a kid, and I had to relearn it all later on. And when I moved here 5 years ago, it was really, really pretty rough. And I still make a lot of mistakes, and I sound kind of stupid in French, you know, this might be hard to believe, but I can sound even stupider than I sound in English. I sound that much dumber in French.
Well, do they bring it up? Do they go like, oh, you stupid? I don't know.
Well, you know, I do think that sometimes people, because my name is so French too, that sometimes when people first, if they haven't met me, they might expect that I'm Québécois because my name it's just as Québécois as you could be. Yeah. And then I'll like start speaking and they'll realize that something's off about me, and that like I'm then usually they'll realize that I'm an Anglophone pretty fast after that.
Yeah. So man, you missed all the Trump years, huh?
I did. Yeah, I moved here during Obama, and then Trump got elected, and then like that whole 4 years has rolled by, and I just watched in horror from up here, and I don't know. I felt a lot of guilt. Sometimes I was like, oh, should I be doing something more for my countrymen? And I didn't know what to do. So
you have dual citizenship though, right?
I do. Yeah.
So your book came out a couple of years ago. In French though, right? Yeah, it came out in 2017.
And
that was just like you had already been publishing it as like as mini comics, like just serializing it. But how long did you serialize that for? 10 years?
No, close. I mean, it's so crazy when I think about it. But yeah, between the first issue and the last issue was 5 years.
Yeah.
For 5 issues. But it's so crazy because it's basically like the first issue came out, and then it took me 2 years to get the second issue to come out. And then I did issues 3, 4, and 5 all in like a year and a half or 2 years or something like that. So I was much more like on task after that. And that was basically after I moved to Montreal because, you know, I got the chance to like not have a day job, and I just worked creative stuff, design and illustration, and doing my comics full time. Mm-hmm. And so I was and just my brain changed, you know, like I was in a different stage of my life. So I was able to just knuckle down and do the whole book. And I remember I drew at least half of it in 1 year. So it's like, it's totally weird to me that like the first, you know, 48 pages took me 3 years to draw or something like that. And then the last 100 pages took me 1 year to draw and write and everything. So it started rolling.
Was it like a process of, you know, like when you're working on your first book, you feel like, well, I don't know, this is your first, I think it's your first book, isn't it?
Yeah. First, full big story kind of thing. Yep.
So isn't there like a lot of build up in your mind about that? Like when you're working on something, you're like, yeah, it's got to be perfect. And you redraw stuff and things like that.
No, absolutely. And I mean, you know, the other thing too, is that I'm like improvisational writer, so it's like I don't have like the whole story in mind when I started drawing the thing, and so I was just stuck, you know. I just was caught up, and I had these ideas for how awesome that the book could be, and I kept like running up against my capacity as a narrative voice, as an illustrator, what have you, technically to do what I wanted to do, and I really wanted it to be perfect, and and like I said, like I just was stuck. I was stuck in that mindset, and I'm really, really glad that I was able to break out of it, because sometimes I think about it, I'm like, oh, it could have just, because I've started other graphic novels before and like never finished them, you know, just finished the first chapter or the prologue or something like that, and been like, okay, in the next issue of Friends is the conclusion of this story. Never happened, you know. Yeah, and so I'm so glad that something happened in my brain and I was able to like break out of that. And now I think it's like I'm starting to roll with things a little bit more. So we'll see how it goes. I haven't had the chance to do much of my own writing since Titan came out in French, because I've been drawing for other authors for all that time. Oh, okay. And so that takes up a lot of my time, but I'm really hoping that I'll be able to get fully back into like the full cartoonist mode this year.
Well, what was the difference? What made you finish this? How did you break out of that?
I think, that's a really good question. It's like hard to answer. It's like, I don't want to get like too woo-woo or psychological or something about it. But in some ways it's like, I think I went through a slightly early midlife crisis, and I was like, oh, if I don't do this, if I don't finish this book, I'm never going to finish a book, and I'm just going to not do comics. And that would have been totally okay. I kind of didn't think I was going to be like making comics for a living at this point in my life. You know, yeah. I thought I'd be doing something else, and maybe I would do a little story or something like that. And, but I think I'd like, you know, all through my 30s, my life was changing in all these different ways. And I think I got to a certain point where I had these big changes. You know, my ex-partner and I broke up. I quit my job. I moved here to Montreal to try out some like kind of like a new lifestyle for myself. Mm-hmm. And in the end, I think all those things kind of came together, and I was just like, oh, I have to do it. I just have to finish this one. And maybe I'll never do another book after this at all, and that would be totally fine. But luckily enough, I have like, it's picked up, and I'm drawing, and I have, you know, I still have ideas and things like that.
If it comes out in French from Pow Pow, does it go over to France? Do they distribute in Europe?
Yeah, they have distribution in France, and I got to go with Pow Pow to Angoulême one year, cool. So that was fun. And then I went a couple of years later with my other French publisher, La Pastèque, for another book that I did with them. So in the last few years, I've been to Angoulême twice, and you know, the Festival de Bande Dessinée in Lyon. Also, I went to that one, and so different fun stuff like that. It's been cool, and it's cool. Like the book gets read in France, and there are people there because it's a different market over there. Obviously, it's much bigger market for the French books than what we have here in Quebec.
What's the difference between the translations? Like, do the books look different, or the same cover design stuff?
Do you mean the French versus the English one?
Yeah.
They're a little different. I have them right here, actually.
Oh, good.
So they're different. The French one is like this. So. Okay. Kind of a square trim size. What's kind of cool about this is like Pow Pow, all their books look exactly the same. So they have like the same style, and they all have the little French flaps. And so it was kind of fun to like do my design to fit that. And then the Oni one has a different feel to it, you know?
Yeah.
So they're almost the same size, but they have a different vibe to them.
The Oni one did a spot gloss on the cover, huh?
Yeah. They put a little spot gloss on there. So
that's great. Does it have French flaps or not?
No French flaps. No.
So
I don't merit the French flaps.
Yeah. There's a reason they call them French flaps, huh? Americans, we don't use that shit.
Mass market paper, trade paperback. That's the way we go.
You were a publisher, weren't you? For a while?
Yeah, I published, like, you know, I mean, it's almost glorified to say I was a publisher, but I started by publishing like my own comics and zines and things, and then I published other people's zines, and I was like in a little zine collective, and I ended up publishing a few books. Like I published an anthology of like fantasy comic stories that was pretty fun, and a few other people that I knew. I would like publish their comics, so I would kind of like front the cost of publishing it because it's like I knew how to do all that sort of stuff, and we had a website and all that stuff. And then and then eventually like it gets a little tiresome to do the self-publishing thing, as I'm sure you know. And so eventually I kind of wrapped it up, and then for a while I helped Zach Soto, right?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so he's a good friend of mine, and I helped him for a while. I was like the art director for his also small press publication studio, which was like a little bit bigger than me, so that was fun. It was like kind of like kind of leveling up or growing up and things like that.
Was that a study group?
Study group, yeah. It was my thing was called Family Style, and then I closed that up, and then I worked with Zach at Study Group. I've been really wanting to do some, because I write science fiction, and I've been really wanting to like write science fiction that is less dystopian, something that is more about like solutions and positive answers to the things that we're all struggling with. But it's real hard. It's hard to write that stuff. It's like easy to write about like the evil corporation or like the truculent government that's like, crushing the people. And it's much harder to write about like the union of like students who's going to protest the project and then like turn the system around. It takes a greater leap of the imagination to think your way out of it. And it's true. It's like I can definitely imagine the Black Mirror versions of all the social media stuff that we do pretty well. And then it's very hard for me to imagine like how we convert it all into some positive thing. But I guess that's why, I don't know, we need smarter people than me working on that stuff.
Well, I don't know, man, because Titan seems very current.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's amazing to me to hear you say that like you didn't really have it planned out, because I'm like, really? Like this is like the luckiest plot that you could have like come up with. I mean, it's just like I mean, I don't know. It's so amazing that you were able to find like a way, and it's not like heavy handed or anything, but it just like, it works so well for 2021 or 2020 or whatever we call this awful landscape.
The era that we're in.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
I mean, that's incredible. So when you're pitching this to Pow Pow, or did you have to pitch it to them? They found it and you weren't finished with it at the time, I guess, right?
No, it was totally total stroke of luck. I had the first issue was already done by the time I moved here, and I was finishing the second issue when I moved here. So that first issue, I would just give it away to people, I'd be like, moi aussi, je fais des bandes dessinées, hey, and like I would hand them my little comic, and then some people would read it, and some people would toss it or whatever. And if I remember correctly, I gave it to the cartoonist Pascal Girard, and then he ended up giving it to Luc. He thought Luc would like it, and Luc did, and he was like, okay, I would like to publish it in French. I was like, okay, I'm ready, sign me up. So I didn't really have to pitch it. He was like, tell me more about the story and what you have planned, and
you're like,
yeah, I was like, some stuff happens.
Yeah.
Giants.
Yeah. So at that moment where you're just like, holy shit, I better finish this.
Yeah, that was like definitely like a come to Jesus moment where I was like, okay, I need, there's an expectation that I'm going to finish this book in this year. I need to finish it. And then even just a little bit before or contemporaneous with that too, I was when I was starting to, maybe a little bit before that, but I was starting to get the book in like normal comic book stores through Diamond. Mm-hmm. And, it wasn't like great shakes, but like, every time an issue came out, like a couple hundred, the first issue came out and like 800 people ordered, a copy or something like that.
That's great.
And it, like, of course, it's like if you've ever sold the comics through everyone who sold comics through Diamond, there's like the issue 1 is here, and then you just go down like each issue. So they were always less, but like I felt like a real obligation to my like the fans, the readership. I was like, wow, you know, like multiple hundreds of people bought this comic, and it's like, I owe them. I owe them to get them the next issue. And I can't wait 2 years to get them the next issue. I need to get them the next issue. So I like made a rule to myself that I had to an issue come out every 6 months. And I kind of like did that a little bit faster, but yeah, no, it became really real for me. And I was like, oh, okay, I have to do it. It's my job. Like, it's my job to finish this work. It's not just a hobby or something I'm just doing for myself.
Was that the point where you sat down with like a pen and paper and were like, I need to write out what's going to happen here?
I never wrote out what was going to happen.
What? What the fuck?
No, I mean, I kind of draw and write at the same time. So I've tried to write a script and I never know how to do it, you know? So, I mean, it's not totally true. It's like I would write out my beats or something like that. And I'd be like, okay, this chapter, some things happen in this chapter. But I would never be like, okay, then Joao says this, and then Phoebe says this. All of that stuff I usually was doing on the page, you know? So I would like, but it's kind of easy because, you know, it's like I draw on a grid, or like a 3-tier system. Yeah. And then also like starting with the second issue of Titan, I started drawing digitally. And so I'll edit what I'm working on too. You know, it's like if I'm drawing it all and like plopping in the word balloons and it doesn't feel right, like I'll shift things around and I'll say, okay, it's like film, right? You know, like you can cut and move things around and then like insert another scene or move things around and stuff like that. So I do that throughout the whole process. But no, there's never a point, or at least not yet in my career, where I'm like, okay, and the end, here's the story is done, and now I'm going to draw it all. That's never happened.
Do you know Josh Cotter, that cartoonist?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think he's really, really brilliant.
He's amazing. He's been working on, he's like I think he just finished the second book of like this epic like sci-fi thing he's written, and he pencils the entire book out and then goes back and inks it all. And it's like, holy shit, I could never do that. It's like
because for you want to get to the inking because it's like your pleasure points or whatever.
I'm the same way as you. Like I mean, I have basically a list of plot points, and then I just dive in, and I like that looseness and the freedom to spontaneously connect. You know, because your brain is connecting all these things and stuff as you're working on it, and that's exciting for me. That's exciting enough for me to keep going forward. But I could never be like, I'm going to sit down and write all of this and then go back and ink it all because the immediacy is gone. Yeah, I don't know. So I can't believe that's the way he works. And I want to talk to him about that at some point. But I
mean, I think you almost, I mean, I don't know if I would have guessed it, but you can almost see it looking at that book I think that's called Not Away, the book, but it really feels like so complete, right? Like when you see it, even though it's like the most sprawling sort of like high-end sci-fi thing, mm-hmm. it you can feel the threads like all working together in that, and I don't know, I can see how it's like a chunk. Oh, yeah. And then not that your work isn't complete, but like I think your work also has like a kind of a daily strip vibe or a comic strip vibe, and there's like the pages are like kind of each, not all the time, but often in your work the pages are each like a beat, and then there's like a kind of a rhythm that accumulates with that, so it's a different kind of feeling, you know.
It is, yeah, for sure. And his is like, it's going to be like 5 volumes, I think, or something. It's like,
that's so insane because the first volume itself is like this big.
Yeah, and it's like the most densely cross-hatched art you've ever seen. It's incredible. Did you have any? You can be truthful. Did you have any options for this yet?
It's getting started to, but you know, it's like one of those things. It's like you never know. But I would love it. Like I like movies and TV and stuff like that. It's like. It's a big inspiration for me, and my art is like comes from cinema, and so for me, I wouldn't be a betrayal of like my artistic roots to be like have a movie or something like that. That would be like a total dream. I would love it, but it's one of those things that's like really early in the process, and you know, we'll see. It's like you know, it's not like George R.R. Martin, right? Like it's not like already millions of copies have sold and there's a fan base and everything like that.
Yeah, it would help the sales of your book and stuff. But I think that the shame of that is gone. Like, I don't think people even, you know, back 10 years ago, maybe people would have been like, I'm not selling out with my work for a TV or a movie or whatever. Like some people would have said that. Like now I'm just like, dude, if you can get any money as a cartoonist, like any way possible, you should do that. Like you just got to take care of yourself, man.
No, yeah, I mean, like it's like, yeah, you people should be able to be alive and, you know, like have healthcare and like, you know, maybe even like own a condo or some little bit of like security like that. And that's really hard to get selling little funny books. But the other thing too is that like now I think that they're you know, we have like some models, right? Like for like fairly successful adaptations, you know, like you know, like Chuck Forsman's, two of his books have been adapted, and I really liked both the adaptations. Yeah. They're pretty different from his comics, but they were cool. Like they were really interesting and like good little pieces of television cinema. And I think he liked them too. And so it's in, you know, and you know, we can go back further than that. But like back in the 90s, like what were the examples of like the good things that were getting made, you know, until Ghost World broke out, like it was pretty sketchy to say that you were going to like get your comic book adapted or what have you.
Yeah, there was like always a Yummy Fur project that was in the works, and it was like,
that would be so wild. What was it going to be?
I don't know. There was like always, I think this guy he's had the rights to Yummy Fur for a long time.
Like Ed the Happy Clown, or like? I
guess so, yeah. But it's like, okay. How could that be good? How could you do it?
I don't know.
And Ed the Happy Clown is like not something you just hand to somebody who's never read an alternative comic either. It's like,
no,
that's really weird. That would turn you off. You'd be like,
maybe like his like maybe all the autobio stuff could be turned into really good stuff. But we'll see.
Yeah. I don't know. But what is the other book that you did for Pow Pow? Or no, for
I did. I also have it here on this desk.
I'm glad you do.
It's this book. So this was a book I did with
wow.
Yeah, it's called 13th Avenue. It's like a the people.
Is it black and white?
Yeah, it's like black and white kind of with a faux fake zipatone kind of thing. But that was fun. It was so right after Titan came out, I was like, so that was like the thing where it's like you know, like you work hard to get your work started, but then there's a certain amount that just comes down to luck, right? Like you hand your issue of your comic to somebody who turns out to be interested in publishing it and likes it. And then once that book came out, then when Titan came out, immediately after that, like the same weekend it came out, like the editor, Fred, the editor of La Pastèque, he came to me. He was like, "Oh, you know, we have this project that we're working on, and that's written by a novelist. Her name's Geneviève Peterson, and she's a Quebecois novelist, and she's pretty well known in the literary world here. And she had written this short story that was supposed to get turned into a comic." But the illustrator who was signed up for it, who was actually a friend of mine, they were like, "Okay, I want to work on my own stuff. I don't want to work on this comic anymore." And so Fred from La Pastèque, he was like, "Hey, do you want to draw it?" And I was like, "Sure, sounds good." So then I started doing that, which was kind of really interesting. I had never worked with another writer before. I always worked on my own stuff, basically. Mm-hmm. And another thing that was interesting is that comic, Geneviève, she didn't write a script for it, and she had never written a comic before. So it was like a short story. It was like basically a 30-page short story. And then I turned it into sort of like a 180-page comic. And so that was kind of interesting. It was almost like an adaptation job, you know, because it was like prose, you know, with like descriptions of like how things smell or like what people are thinking. And so then it was my job to like kind of cut it up and turn it into a graphic novel, or the first book in a series. And so that was really fun. It's a YA thing.
Yeah, cool. So is there a second one that you're going to work on, or?
There's going to be a second one. I'm still I'm still waiting for Genevieve's is writing or finishing up the edits on the second volume. And as soon as she gets that, I'll start working on that. The very first zine I ever did was I'm glad it did I'm glad it's like not available. It's like, it was called like the Comics Journal, or not the Comics Journal, the Comics Reporter, or something like that. Like before Tom did his thing, and I was like, you know, 14 or something like that. I can't remember what the name for it was, but it was like interviews and things like that. And I interviewed Stan Sakai for that comic, because it was like I did 2 interviews at the San Diego Comic-Con one year, him and Paul Pope in the same year, and they were going to be like my feature interviews for issue 2 and issue 3, but I never published issue 2 and number 3 and issue 3. So they're like those interviews, I just wasted those guys' time. And they both did cover art for me, which is pretty cool too.
Wow.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, it was it's pretty cool. I feel really bad that I never published their things. Like, and Paul Pope, he sent me the original of the cover art. So I have like this little 8.5 by 11 drawing by Paul Pope. Oh, man. And then Stan Sakai, he didn't, of course he didn't send me the original, but years later, I saw he had like this Art of Stan Sakai book. And there was like the drawing that he did for me, like full page. And at the bottom, it says like, art I drew for a never published defunct comic book zine. I was like, that's my zine that's mentioned in this big like tome of Usagi Yojimbo, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. But still, I feel bad. I mean, I was 14 or whatever, I don't, and I had like a little tape recorder, I don't feel that bad for failing at that point. But Stan Sakai was it's huge mental influence on like how I wanted to draw comics for a long time.
So will you tell me about the process of trying to find an American publisher for Titan, or was it not really a process?
No, it was totally a process. It was like a full year. And I worked with, I didn't have an agent exactly, but I worked with a good friend of mine. He kind of semi-agented for me. Brett Warnock, who is the old publisher at Top Shelf. And he was kind of transitioning into like doing new things, and he like has a cool cooking magazine that he publishes called Kitchen Table Magazine. It's like, I think he's like super happy doing that. And but the year I was shopping Titan around, where he approached me about kind of working with me to approach people. I was like, yeah, let's try it out, let's see what we do. And we shopped it around all over, like we came up, we worked on the pitch and like sent the book to all these different places. And, we would get like interest or nibbles, or like people would be nice and interested, but then it like, it wouldn't always, it just doesn't always work, it didn't always fit in with everybody's publishing schedules. And so we got a lot of rejections. And then, I won't get into too many details, but basically, like in the end, it came down to there were a couple different publishers who were like, had some interest in it. And in the end, I went with Lineforge, which another friend of mine, Hazel Nuvalent, was the what do you call that? Acquiring editor for Titan there at Lineforge. Yeah, and then so I was like, okay, like here it's at Lineforge, and then Lineforge merged with like bought Oni Press, and so then it ended up like coming through to being part of Oni also. Like, so they're like all one big company now. So it was like a long circuitous road that like went all over the place, and I was like definitely not sure, but it was very DIY too. Like it was very hands-on, like the whole time, like approaching people and talking to everybody to try and find the right place that was gonna like, I don't know, get it out there. And then once it was at Oni, then the COVID, it wasn't delayed too much, but it was delayed a bit because of the merger and a bit because of COVID. So everything kind of like the process took longer. But one kind of cool thing is it gave me a little time. I like got to go back and redraw some of the worst drawings at the beginning of the book, and I even rewrote some parts and added some pages. So I had a little extra padding to do that.
So how much of the book is digitally drawn and how much is paper?
The first 3 chapters out of 12 chapters were drawn on a piece of paper, and then all the rest of it was drawn digitally. And then at the end, I went and redrew some of the stuff in the very first chapter digitally, just because the first chapter I was really, really just learning how to draw a comic or put it together. So I would, like 3/4, 80% of the book is digital, and then the rest is, then the little bit at the beginning is analog.
Yeah. How come, just to go back to this other thing, it's like, did they try and bring it to Top Shelf? Does Brett not have anything to do with Top Shelf anymore?
No, he's still, he's still friends with Chris at Top Shelf, but yeah, no, like Top Shelf was like totally in the mix of the discussions,
And did you send it to Fantagraphics?
You're just gonna have me list all the people who said no to me?
Yeah,
Yes.
no, it wound up exactly where it fits. You know,
I've had a few people say that, which is always really nice to hear. One person I went to for advice when I was looking for different publishers was Ezra Clayton Daniels, you know, and he, because his book was published at Lineforge, and and we were in discussions with Lineforge about publishing there, and him being published there was like a big reason why I was like I was extra interested in it because of that. I really like Ezra's work, and it was like kind of I could see us as kind of like fellow travelers or something in the comics world.
yeah.
And you know, and he was talking too about like what you're saying, you know, like all the different publishers have like their different vibe, like their different feeling, and you know, I think it used to be that you sometimes saw like you know, like somebody like a Dan Clowes or a Chris Ware who's like always published by the same publishing house, you know, all the time. And then now I think it's more like, I mean, I think you're published by like quite a few different publishing places, right? Like quite a few different companies have published your work.
Yeah.
And like different kind of projects. So like there's like your personal anthology. There's like the things that you write and draw, and then sometimes you write for other publishers and like, or write for other, or draw for other writers and things like that.
Yeah.
And so each publishing house kind of has its different vibe, its different energy, and you're just kind of picking up on all that. That sounds very hippie-ish, but you know what I mean.
And what about 13th? Is it 13th Ave? 13th Ave?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Is there are English readers going to be able to read that?
I'm sure eventually they will, because La Pastèque is really good at getting their books into translation. But I bet that will wait until I think all the books are done, because it's a series. So probably, I think that the series is expected to have 3 books total. So I'm sure that once all 3 are done, like it'll end up at a publisher in the United States. But it'll take a little time, and I think it'll translate really well. It'll be really interesting to see how it comes across, because Geneviève does all this like kind of interesting stuff with language in the book, because it takes place in Montreal, where we both live now. But it's the kid in the book is from where she's from, which is in Saguenay, in Rimouski, which is like far away from here. It's a kind of like the kind of like the boonies in some ways. It's like it's a further away from the city, and so it's all about like kind of like culture shock as this kid moves into his new world. And there's some little things with like the language and the slang that the kids use. It's a little bit different. They all have like their own voices. So that'll be interesting to see how it comes across in English.
Yeah. I know, isn't that weird? I always wonder about like, how would you translate Ulysses? You know, like this book, it's like so Irish. Like how would you make that French? Because like it's, you know, like, and I don't know. And I wonder about humor too. Like how do you translate jokes so that they're equally as funny?
Well, there's a saying, traduire c'est trahir. So to translate is to betray. It's like a translation is treason, I guess is what they say. And so it's really true. And now that I've kind of worked on both sides, like I've had my work, my writing in English translated into French. I've translated writing in French into English, and I've also translated visually like French words into illustrations and things like that. And so I see how that process works. And translation really, I think it really has more in common with, say, adapting something for the cinema that was originally a novel, or making a comic book from a short story or something like that, than it does with like, say, what we imagine, which is just like you take the word and then you put the English equivalent word in its place. It's so rarely like that. There's so much nuance that goes into it, and you always have to make a lot of decisions. There's no such thing as a perfect translation. You always have to be making cuts, changing things. Like there's like nothing is a one-to-one thing. It's really a work of art, and that's why sometimes you'll get books with like many different translated versions. And then, like you're saying, when you get into something like James Joyce, where there's the cultural context, but also just like the linguistic, all the games and all that, it's a crazy process.
Did you play like Dungeons and Dragons and that kind of stuff when you were?
Yes. How did you guess?
Did you what comic books did you read when were you a little nerd?
I was pretty nerdy. I kind of came to comics a little bit later than some of the people I know. So I kind of came to comics like through like, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle cartoons, and then they kind of like drifted me in through comics. But it was a pretty fruitful time to be into comics, like the early 90s, the late 80s, early 90s. So that was kind of fun because you got to kind of like level up like pretty fast, so it's like I started off reading like the cartoon Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comics, but then like pretty soon I'm starting to read X-Men, and then I read X-Men for a while, and then I'm like reading like, I don't know, Vertigo, and then you get into Jaime Hernandez or Dan Clowes or what have you, and you just kind of ping back and forth, and or even just like like oddball, like one thing I used to love back in the day when I was reading comics was like anthologies. I was like the ultimate fan of like comics anthologies. I was always reading them, like Dark Horse Presents or
oh yeah, that's right.
I loved Dark Horse Presents, and then there was another one like Burning Chrome or something like that, and I loved it. Like I would always like buy every issue, but it was cool. Like you discovered so many. I don't know. I kind of miss that. I mean, like you recently were in that new anthology now. That is it called now?
Yeah,
the Fantagraphics.
Yeah,
I thought.
Fantagraphics, yeah.
I remember. I haven't picked up many issues of that, but I picked up the first two, and I thought it was really great that that was just all self-contained little short stories, and like you could just pick it up and enjoy it and like let it go. And I was like, oh, that's what I need to start picking that up again, because I really appreciate that. I love that mode, just. And just in general, when I was a kid, I feel like I was just being exposed to comics from all different sides, and I didn't know what was going on. Like there wasn't a culture for. There was a culture for it, but there wasn't like a comic book industrial complex that was like leading you to reading certain things. Like in some ways, you like went into the shop and you just like picked up. You would pick up like an issue of Ghost Rider, but you'd also pick up an issue of like, Elementals. Yeah, like whatever, like, and then like some kind of like, like not really okay for teenagers Grendel comic, and you'd be like, all right, like what is this? And so, or some weird European Moebius one-off reprint that happened, and I really liked that vibe, and I feel like it led me down to like just reading all kinds of stuff. There wasn't like a canon that I was supposed to have read. Maybe there was, but like I kind of ignored it. Do you ever write for other people?
No, I never have.
Is it interesting to you, or is it just a betrayal of like how you view yourself as a creator?
I never had the opportunity, but also I wouldn't even know how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Like, how would you do it? Would you write it? Like, would you do it like in thumbnail sketches?
No, I don't think. I think you're never. I think you should never. That's one lesson I would say that I've learned from both working with people and then like listening to other people's stories, is I think that even if you know how to draw, like as the author, you should never. It's like driving, like it's like you're in the passenger seat and you're grabbing the steering wheel. Even if you only mean to do it like, oh, just a nudge over to the left hand of the lane, that's like, it's totally dangerous. It might like totally careen the car and like crash everything. Or at the minimum, it's going to really, really irritate the driver. I think you can be like, oh, I think we should turn left here, but I don't think you can ever like pull the wheel to the left.
Yeah, you should just trust them as their own visual.
I think so. If you don't trust them, right, then you shouldn't collaborate with them, right?
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, like if someone drew something and you were like, oh, that's not how I imagine it, you could do that thing where you like draw an arrow pointing to something and be like, maybe change this to this. But I don't think redrawing it would be. I think that would be scary.
How do you get your scripts? I mean, I know you said that the other one was just a story, but like for the new thing you're working on, The Secret, is it actually like a panel one kind of a script?
Yeah, but yeah, it's a total script. It's like a like page one, panel this, panel that. And I don't think that the writers who shall go unnamed until they're announced, but I don't think that they would be mad to say if I were to say publicly that I like make a lot of alterations to that. So if they're like, okay, here's the 7 panels for the page, I don't necessarily draw 7 panels for the page. Like I always try and like stay true to the spirit of what they're doing, but like because I'm the person who's drawing it, like I feel like that's my voice going into it. So then I pick the things and do them. The metaphor, I like metaphors a lot, and I like and I often feel that drawing a comic is the same, I guess that's a simile, is like being the director of a film. Mm-hmm. And so it's like you're like the screenwriter creates the work, and without the screenwriter, there's no narrative, there's no story, you know, like the thing's not going to happen. But the director is the person who's like shooting everything, right? Like, so you pick the shots, you dress up the characters, you do the lighting and all those things. And it has to kind of be a collaboration you know, like, so in the screenplay, there might be a thing that's like, oh, in this shot, it's this thing. But I think in most of the collaborations on that front, you know, like the director would be like, well, I like that idea for a shot, but I also think it might work differently this way. And you know, it's a collaboration. You run back and forth.
Yeah. Did you ever watch this? I think it was Cartoonist Kayfabe when they had Todd McFarlane on. And he's talking about like, if you can't do like your monthly comic, you're a fucking bum. He's like, all you do is every day you do one page, 6 days or 5 days a week or whatever, you do a page. On the weekend, you take the weekend off. Monday comes, you do another page. At the end of the month, you have your monthly comic done. He's like, if you can't do that, you're a bum. He's like, there's no reason. And I was like, God damn.